Hi, everybody. This is Jason Klom with the Comedy on Vinyl podcast. You can watch this full video at youtube.com/comedy on vinyl. Today, that's how you say that. I'm watching a comedy album. Damn it, really? I'm listening to I'm not cutting these things. I'm not going to bother editing. I'm listening to a comedy album every day for 2017. I'm still playing catch up. This weekend is going to be a good weekend for catch up, I hope. And I picked, thanks to a friend helping me out because I do not have it, a friend let me borrow, the Steve Martin Brothers. And that is the only Steve Martin album I haven't heard. And here's my concern, is I'm starting to realize as I listen to some of these that my perspective is getting warped based on expectation, which makes sense that it would. It's as if somebody really upsells you on, that's not the right word, but if somebody really oversells you on something, you're bound to be disappointed. And actually, if somebody tells you you're going to be disappointed, I think the same thing happens. So really just level expectations by saying, here's the thing, you might enjoy it. That's all. But you constantly hear that the Steve Martin Brothers is Steve Martin's, not only his worst album, but it's not that good. And so it kind of did color my listening experience. Now, there's another thing going on where one half of the album is comedy with a little bit of banjo, and the other half is all banjo, no comedy. And it was his lowest selling record, his lowest charting record, etc., etc., etc. He brought on other comedy writers for the first time to work with him on this album. I would actually recommend, if you go to Fuji Puzzle Box, taylorjessen.blogspot.com, you should look up, there's an album on there that talks about the making of, I think it's Wild and Crazy Guy. It is an album that might as well be a podcast. It is an interviewer interviewed Steve Martin about the making of, I believe it's Wild and Crazy Guy. There's also one about the making of one of the Python albums. It's remarkable stuff. But we're talking about the Steve Martin Brothers today, and it is a little uneven. The comedy is, maybe it's, it was shortly after he made this, he said, I am not doing stand-up anymore. And I don't know if it was a result of this album not being as well received, or if you can hear that on the album. And I'm looking at this with this historical eye that also might be skewed based on what I think Steve Martin felt about stand-up comedy at the time. But there's some good jokes on it, with the exception, there are jokes on here that are where he talks about there's a fart zone instead of the ozone layer. It affects the ozone layer. That's like the low end, but it's also the kind of thing he would do before, but it doesn't come across in the same way here. The character is maybe inconsistent and maybe doesn't work as well if he is actually succeeding. And obviously he was hugely succeeding in the other ones. He was selling out stadiums, but I think when you see this guy who's already gravitating away from stand-up comedy, maybe it's weird to have a guy play a character who has complete disdain for the audience, even though it's still a funny character. Also, the material, maybe it's not as good. I don't know. There's a bit where he talks about what he loves about America. You see a lot of albums with tracks like that in the 70s. Albert Brooks did a track like that. Damn it, I just listened to one a couple weeks ago and I can't remember which one it is. Now I'm getting so thrown. You probably saw me talk about it. But in this one, he talks about an Uncle Todd who waves his penis. That's a very simple joke that there's no context given to it, but that's one of the things he loves about America, and that's funny. And then there's one bit where he says he's okay with foreigners coming to our land as long as they speak our native language, Apache. Again, good stuff. Steve Martin's a good comedy writer. It feels like that's a Steve Martin joke. I could be wrong. But then, the comedy is not bad. It's just not, it doesn't have the same speed to it. And I was expecting what I got. I knew the other half was a banjo album. And he's a good banjo player. I think he would probably talk that down and say, yeah, I'm not that great a banjo player. I'm a comedian. That's fine. It's fun to listen to. I enjoy banjo music, but I didn't care. I think the banjo music works best when it's interspersed with comedy. And the comedy doesn't need banjo, but it's fun. But that banjo playing, if it's on a Steve Martin album, it should have been, I wouldn't say alternating tracks, but it could have been a banjo-heavy comedy show. Steve Martin, could you do that now, please? Because, it was then, 28 years before he released another album, and that was a banjo album. So it was just a hard cut in the middle of an album to a new career, even though he was actually on his way to a big film career. but it's like, here, my next album will be this. And yeah, but Steve Martin, just do a banjo-centric comedy album. That'd be fine. You don't owe us anything. You've created some of the greatest comedies of all time. I'm just saying, for those of us who love comedy albums, it'd be a ton of fun. That's it. If you share this, please share it. Hashtag comedy album a day. Tell people about it. Like I said, I got a few albums to catch up on. But I said at least 365 albums for the year. Possibly more, because I've got podcasts coming up. Speaking of which, next Wednesday, the next episode of Comedy on Vinyl is our 6th anniversary show. Because the 6th anniversary of the podcast is this coming Monday or Tuesday or whatever. So we just recorded it yesterday with James Urbaniak and my buddy Mike Warden, who's the producer. Hasn't done an episode of the show in a long time, so that was a lot of fun. Talking about that Martin Mull album, that second Martin Mull album. So check that out on Wednesday. It's going to be a ton of fun. That's about it. Follow me at jklamm, JKLAMM. Follow us at Comedy on Vinyl. Subscribe on iTunes. Subscribe on YouTube, please. And as always, have a good thing.